welcome to the third day. I know people are still coming in, but we've got quite a tight schedule today, so I'm already unfortunately a few minutes late, so I'll start welcoming you as people are coming in. So my name's Dr. Libby Salno. I'm undertaking a PhD in this field at St Joseph's Hospice and the University of Edinburgh, and I'm also a palliative medicine doctor at St Joseph's Hospice. And as Manjula is actually doing one of the plenary speeches today, we thought it was better if I introduced her and the day. So I've got a few notices, as always. The conference is now on YouTube. It's both being live streamed currently, but also all of the plenary sessions over the past few days are available to watch as standalone videos. If you type in Public Health Palliative Care 2015, I'm sure that will bring up the relevant sessions so you can watch them and share them with colleagues who aren't able to be here. There are post-it notes on your table, which are for feedback about the conference, thoughts, reflections, actions, and feedback about how we would do things differently. Please do write some comments and stick them on, leave them on the tables and we will collect them at the end. So any thoughts you have, just leave on the tables. There are additional BMJ supplements available, which have got all of the abstracts for poster workshop and oral sessions in there. So there are many available at the display stand, which is over around left as you leave this room. They're free of charge, so please take a few and distribute them back to your colleagues at home. I've also been told to keep time. I'm also keeping us a bit late so far, but we need to keep time today because we've got a full action-packed day. So a plea to our speakers and chairs to keep on time. Social media update. Yesterday we had 1.2 million impressions, over 800 tweets, and 195 participants in that discussion, which is brilliant. So keep tweeting. The hashtag is PCI, PHPCI15. And if you have any questions, Kerry is the go-to person for social media for the conference. And so it's really nice, I was reflecting on the way in, around where we've come to since this conference was first started in 2009 in Kerala, when a group of us decided that we needed something to begin moving forward in this field. There were lots of people undertaking, or a few people undertaking work, but really as real, lone, isolated practitioners seen as slightly crazy often by their institutions. So we thought a conference would be a good place to start to bring people together. The first one we had 60 people in Kerala and about 15 international delegates, many of whom are here today. And there's been an increase in number in each one, so it's gone through Dhaka and then through Limerick and now here to Bristol. But I think there feels something quite different, certainly to me, at this conference, which is that we're not trying to sell the concept here. We're not trying to convince people that there's validity in engaging communities and community development and the new public health approach. Everyone here accepts that and is working in this field to develop some really innovative projects. So rather than kind of aspirational, actually, a lot of this is much more about actual practice and developing what we're doing. So it feels really different. And I think that's really, really exciting because it shows the progress as a movement that we've made. And I can only think where we'll be in the next 2, 4, 6 years running on from this. So thank you very much. I look forward to hearing the sessions this morning with Manjula and Elizabeth, and I shall hand over to Julia to chair the rest of the morning. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I'm going to take Chair's prerogative just to say today's the 3rd anniversary of my mum's death here in Bristol, and she was very lucky, we were all very lucky to have compassionate communities, and that's St Peter's Hospice, Marie Curie, the NHS, the palliative care nurses, the pharmacies, the ladies in co-op, the ladies at the library, the ladies in and boys in the coffee shop, and the whole local community. And so, although I'm a public health practitioner and I lead in Public Health England on end-of-life care, I have a really personal interest, and I hope that everybody will be able to experience the community support and the wonder of the NHS and voluntary sector that helped my mummy and our family 3 years ago. So sorry to take that opportunity, but I feel it very passionately today. And people in the co-op, the ladies still remember my dad and ask after him, and is he okay, living without my mum. So that's real community. But it's a huge pleasure for me to introduce Manjula today. She has over 25 years experience of working in the voluntary sector with community development, with a large international charity, as well as smaller community-based charities. She wrote that at the beginning of the century. That makes it sound like it's a long, long time ago, but it's long and not so long ago. She joined the charity Murray Hall Community Trust to start innovative ways of working with community services. She works in Sandwell, and from a public health perspective, Sandwell is a beacon of community development from all sorts of public health, whether it's obesity reduction or promotion of health and well-being across the whole spectrum of public health. And I had a great privilege actually to sit with Manjula after the dinner the other evening and hear some of her case studies. And you have occasions in life when the experience of speaking to somebody or listening to them, more importantly, really touches your heart. And the way she described the way in which her team care for some of the most vulnerable individuals in society as they're approaching the end of life was deeply, deeply touching. And I will remember those case studies because they were examples of what people who really care can do. So in 2009, it was a natural step in the midst of lots of community development work in Sandwell to develop compassionate communities, and Manjula is going to talk about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. My name is Manjula Patel, as Julia has said, and I'm responsible for the health and social care portfolio for Murray Hall Community Trust. And in the next half an hour, I'm going to talk about our community development approach within that portfolio. And to do that, I'll start off with just describing and giving you some background to the charity and where we are situated, and then talk about the supported palliative care service that we deliver in Sandwell and parts of Birmingham. I'm just going to give an update on compassionate communities and talk about a new initiative that we are involved in Sandwell called Community Offer. And then my last example will be a new centre that we're developing for young people with life-limited illnesses. So the context of where the charity is situated is that we're part of a conurbation of the West Midlands that has a history of very high industrial output, but it has now left the area quite deprived, and it has high incidence of all of the major illnesses. Hence, they have a life expectancy that's lower than the national average. And heart of Birmingham, so we support people in the heart of Birmingham and east and north, but the very heart of Birmingham has an ethnic communities that actually form the majority of the population. So Murray Hall Community Trust started in the 1990s, in the early 1990s, as a small group of 2 people, and one of them is here right now. It became a registered charity in 1994. The values of the charity are, as what you would expect, a social action, social justice organisation, and it's embedded in community development approach values. So we help people to live with all challenges of inequalities. Sorry, I can't see the screen. Empowerment. It's hugely important that we start with helping people to help themselves, and part of our empowerment is advocating and facilitating on their behalf. This was one of the first services that Murray Hall started. It was a health information centre, and it's probably one of the first of its kind that started in the early 1990s. And as you can see, we situated it in the high street. This is a map that was drawn probably within the first 5 years that the charity started, and it just gives you a flavour of some of the things that the charity did in those few years. And as you can see, it's very much a public health model of prevention. If we were to draw the map now, I'm sure we'd need lots of paper. At the beginning of the 1990s, the reason that Murray came into existence was that we were part of an infrastructure investment into Sandwell being a deprived area called City Challenge. And the flagship of that pot of money was a new health park, health centre. And Murray was one of the key partners in the development of that health centre, together with primary care and acute services. And Murray we situated that information centre, a healthy cafe, CAB, Citizen Advice Bureau, support groups, baby clinics, just to name a few things to bring health and community together. And that was quite innovative for its time. Hence, we had lots of ministerial visits and royal visits as well, because I found it was an innovative project to be doing at the time. We have very much been an anchor for other groups and charities to get established. And some of the things that we've done is to support smaller groups who needed a helping hand to become a charity in their own rights. And that would include things like allotment garden, tips and listeners, the listening project that's there to support people in the communities run by volunteers from all the churches in the area. We've helped toddler groups to get set up, and the latest one was a food bank that we helped to set up. One of the roles that we play in the community is identifying gaps, and that's mostly because people in the communities bring them to us. So then we end up taking them to strategic groups and policy makers along with a solution. And very often those solutions are innovative, who have gone on to be mainstream services. I'll give you an example of one later. But in everything that we do, we work an awful lot in partnerships, and whether that's with small groups, informally or formally as part of consortium or alliances. And Murray is quite different to any other charity. So apart from the health and social care portfolio, the other portfolio includes children and families. And currently we manage 11 children's centres from that portfolio and a therapeutic service for children and young people across Sandwell, that is. So we really do support people from the cradle to the grave, hence the terms burn to work. You heard it this week. And currently we employ about 140 employees, we have about 80 volunteers. The British Support Service is a supportive palliative care service, a non-clinical supportive palliative care service. And that came about because people in the community highlighted to us gaps in services. They didn't know where to start the support. And being a charity, we took the opportunity to apply for a pot of funding that was available at the time with solutions. And those solutions were based on the things that people told us that they needed. And that was 14 years ago. And the service is now actually the biggest, the largest funded supported palliative care service in Sandwell. We work very closely with the hospices, and I would say that 5 or 6 hospices within the surrounding area. Sandwell, because it's a deprived area, does not have a hospice in Sandwell. In some ways, we prefer that wrong. And the model of the service is about information. It's the first step of empowerment. So we help people to understand what information, what service is out there. And somebody once told me, how can I ask for what I don't know about? And that's what we aim to do, is to help people know what's available out there. We'll advocate on their behalf and we'll facilitate where we need to. Practical support could be anything from helping people with the daily living tasks of housework, just keeping the house clean and tidy. You can't stay at home if you're not able to maintain your house. And in emotional support, by keeping in touch, we have volunteer befrienders, care for carers, and everything that we do is encompassed by a spiritual dimension of care. And that's about making sure that we can have conversations with people that we support to understand what's most important to them. And we support about 1,000 people a year across London and Birmingham, across their carers and family members. We listen to people, and this is something that we've always done, and in some ways we were doing, and I think it's been said before, this community development, compassionate community, long before we even heard of the term. So we've developed some to people. So when you're the narrator of your story, you're in control of what you choose to say, and bring to the discussion all the things that matter to you the most. And by doing that, we understand what their needs are. And stories have a way of conveying things that you can't really say in any other way. So we were part of a story collecting project that we did in partnership with the Strategic Health Authority at the time, and this was probably about 2007, I think. And we worked with lots of different artists and a professional storyteller, and we collected stories, we worked with people, and they told us their stories. It was incredibly powerful, and you should have a pack of the first primrose in your delegates bag, together with a CD that was voice recorded by voice actors. And one of the reasons that we did that project, at the time, I was part of a group called Dying Well. I think that's what it was called. And that group came together with a minister at the time, Frank Fields, because there was headlines about euthanasia, and as you know, every now and again it is the headlines. And one of the things that I said was that there are lots of stories, but the media only ever pick up on the negative stories. So when you say something or I've discovered is that you end up doing something about it as well. So then they said, well, you collect the stories, so that's why that project came about. But when you think about people in their 40s before they encounter death, they don't know what it feels like, and that's one of the reasons that they are fearful, because they don't know what death and dying feels like. And one of the reasons that we did this book was to make available to people stories about those death and dying experiences. So like all of the charities, we bring together and we facilitate sports, groups, self-help groups, user involvement. And we have a very strong volunteer base. They do different roles, from befriending to facilitating support groups, and we have volunteer drivers. I'm just going to tell you about this little service that started. There's a big history behind it, but I haven't got time for that. But I'll just tell you that we identified that people in our area literally shortened their lives because they could not get to their hospital appointments for life-saving treatment, and all for the need of transport. And we knew that people haven't got the money to take taxis. When you're ill, you can't access public transport because you're not well enough. Now, not everyone fits the criteria for patient transport, and when they do, they may not want to be on travelling for 5 hours for a 10-minute appointment. So we knew that we had volunteer drivers and a need out there, and we've helped to facilitate this service. First is about information, helping people to get there themselves if they want to. So we worked with Central, which is the local public transport organisation, and local authority transport plans. And we came up with something that we think is again quite unique. And we looked at all of the other volunteer transport schemes across the country, and what we came up with is quite unique in the fact that it's about information to start with. So it's always about helping people to help themselves. And You'd be amazed. People are entitled to reclaim their hospital transport expenses. It's a well-kept secret. And every hospital has a different criteria, and every hospital has a different process. And how you go about it is just unknown. So one of the things that we do is help people to understand if they're entitled to it. And if they are, then we'll help them. We'll almost walk them through the process. And if we need to, then we'll fill in the form and take it to the office for them to claim that back. But we now have a group of volunteers, and the service, I could say, is co-produced in that the people who use the service pay the volunteer driver that travel expense, and that makes it affordable for them. So it's almost self-sustaining, but not quite, because we have to facilitate and coordinate some of that work. I'm just going to give an update on the compassionate community work that we're doing, because at the last conference in Limerick, I gave a more in-depth presentation. So for those of you who were there, I don't want to bore you again. But I'll give you an update, and if you are interested in more information, we have some flyers at our display table. So we started doing this work, and really how we've done it has evolved. And I would say that our model of what we do now are around these four principles. So it starts with raising awareness and having discussions in community groups. And we have to really like the discussions. And it's amazing how, when you talk about death and dying and explain the concept of compassionate communities, people out there in the community really get it. They really understand and resonate with it. And part of that is about increasing capacity to care, both at an individual level, but also with groups and community groups. And integration, I'll give you to all of the other models and everything else that's happening internationally. We've also started to look at how we could utilise or help people to utilise their own social networks. So this is a report that we've produced in partnership with the National Council of Palliative Care. Because one of the things that we first said, well, how many people are out there doing this work? So we did a scoping exercise, and it's published, and it's available to download from the Compassionate Community website, if you're interested. We worked with a local academy and their students on an intergenerational project. And the condition was that students could come forward to take part in this project, but they had to bring a family member with them. So we had about 8 to 10 students sign up and a member of their family join them. And the project was about producing images about death, dying and loss. And as you can see, I've got narratives with it. 2 weeks after we started this project, one of our pupils, students, died suddenly playing football on the pitch. So then this project then became quite poignant at school. And at the end, there was lots of images that were produced, and again now on the website, which we had mounted up onto an exhibition board, and we displayed them at a local art centre. I think it was during one of the Dying Masters week for the public. We had lots of different activities going on in that week. At the same time while that work was happening, we had the opportunity to host a play that was touring from Warwick University. It's called Passing On. And it's a stark image, this puppet was, it was representing a passive patient in a hospital bed. And it was really powerful. If you have the opportunity to see it, I would recommend it. But we had a group discussion after that play, and again, it just highlighted some of the issues there at end of life care and how we look after our health. This is the example of integration I wanted to share with you. A few years ago, we were part of a pilot that happened in Sandor called Experience-Led Commissioning. Some of you may have heard of it. It was funded by the Department of Health. It was hosted at a local GP practice, and I think Oxford University was involved in the evaluation. They loved us, experience-led commissioning, because everything that they wanted to achieve, we were doing. And I'm really pleased that at the end, that piece of work, which was a huge piece of work, lots of consultations, they took on some of the work that we do in their themes. The first theme was about listening to people and their story. And as you'll see, the fifth theme was about compassionate communities. And they saw that as a way of culture change within the NHS. And on the back of, so this was the plan that they produced. It became the plan that validated the CCG at the time. And it's supposed to be embedded in their end-of-life strategy. It's currently all the end-of-life services and some of us are going out to tender, so we're waiting to see how much of a reality this becomes. But it's really great that it's in there. And on the back of that, we had some funding from workforce development to deliver training to the frontline workers in health and social care on those two things. And we did that jointly with St Giles Hospice Education Lead. We've also been working with our local diocese, Lichfield Diocese, and they have an agenda called Age on Agenda, and they wanted to do some work on how they could make their members equipped to support people in the community who needed support. And again, they love the concept of compassionate community because it fits in really well with their own mission statement. And this is a piece of work, Grave Talk, that we piloted on behalf of the Church of England in Lichfield Diocese. And it's their version of Death Cafe called Grave Talk. So I worked with the Staffordshire University to produce some of the material for this. And we held a training day for all the facilitators. And there were about 50 people so enthusiastic to talk about death and dying. We equipped them, and then they went out to their own churches and held sessions, which was just amazing, really. But just like members of the rest of the society, people in churches don't always find it easy to talk about death and dying. So this is great news for them. And currently, I think it's being piloted elsewhere in the country. And I think all the pathfinders have been featured during the last 2 days. But we are part of the Birmingham Pathfinders site that's happening in Birmingham. This is something new that we're piloting and testing with the people that we support. So as part of the narrative-based assessment, I think we've always had conversations about who supports you, who helps you, and this is just something that, talking to Julian and his team, we thought we'd try. And this is an example of one of the maps that one of the care coordinators drew with a patient and a carer. And what we found is that when you draw these maps with people, it just makes them aware of their own social networks. And it's an eye-opener, if you like, but we're testing to see how that works. I'll just tell you about the next one, community offer. We're one of 4 charities in Sandwell who are delivering this new initiative. We're only 6 months into the project. It's jointly funded by the local authority and the CCG, and they're really pushing us to get results. So the pressure is on for us to deliver from day one. They had unbelievable, unrealistic expectations. However, we're rising to the challenge. All of the charities are rising to the challenge. And the local authority, they recognise that with the austerity cuts, there are more cuts to come. With the diminishing local authority services, they need to do something to help communities help themselves. So this initiative is to help people out age 65 and over to reduce their social isolation and to increase their social networks and make contacts. So we're working with existing community groups, helping them to increase the capacity of what they're doing, seeing if there are gaps out there, getting in contact with people who are isolated. So we're working with GP practices and been really successful. And again, with some GP practices, but not all. We're still working away at that. It's helping people to make connections, and already we're having some really powerful stories of how people have come along by being able to get out into groups and knowing that there's somebody there that they can turn to. And all of this is to help them. They are becoming active participants. That's it for this, because it's compassionate communities just a bit further down the road before you get to end of life. This is my last example. The Bridge is a partnership that we have with Children's Hospice, which is Acorns Hospice in the Midlands, and Adult Hospice and Child's Hospice, to develop a new centre for young people with life-limiting and life-threatening illnesses. There's an old health centre in Sandwell that the local authority were quite keen, but we did something with it. So the local authority has given us this health centre, and with the funding that we have through the partnership, we have developed parts of the health centre. We're still raising the rest of the money for the other parts. So phase one, which is now complete, includes probably all the things that hospices building would have, like a cafe area, counselling rooms, complementary and physiotherapy rooms, bathrooms, sensory rooms, hairdressers, courtyard, and the space for social and community activities. Phase two will include the kitchen area for learning life skills, training rooms, and this is what the young people have said. They want a recording studio and radio, a studio, music room. We think that there's great potential to develop different services there for young people. Currently, there isn't a lot on offer, and I'm part of the National Task Force in the UK looking at transition for young people with life-limiting illness, and I'm part of one of the regional task groups. And so we know what the gaps are out there. But young people, when you talk to them, they want all the other things that all the young people would want, and gaming plays a big part in that. So they need to have aspirations for training, information sessions, because there's a big gap out there in transition, not just for the young people, the parents, but for the professionals as well. And that's something that we have to start developing, to having drop-in sessions. They wanted somewhere space to have social activities, and parents, they need supports. Letting go of your child who's growing up is hard enough when they're able, when they're disabled, it's even harder. And support groups. Nerve in the motorhome. We have a specially adapted motorhome. I think it's the only one in the country that's been adapted for people in wheelchairs. It has a hoist in there, which is great to enable people to travel. So we started a young people's group. The centre itself was launched in October. So in November we started a young people's group. Only a handful of people who have been used to going to Acorns Hospice. There's only 5 people. They were really enthusiastic. They have set their own aims and objectives for the group. They called it Inspire to Independence, because that's their aspiration, to live an independent life. And sadly, one of the leaders of that group died suddenly in January. For the rest of the group, it was a really sad time. And we wondered whether they would come back again, but they did. And in February, so the next time we met, we carved out time to just talk to them about the loss. And surprisingly, they had never had the opportunity to talk about death and dying. So we have different short films, and there's one short film that I showed them about 2 ladies in the West Midlands who talk about their own view and what they want. And then they're laughing and joking because they're saying, one of them said they wanted a karaoke for her wife. One of the young boys in that group was just blown away that you could have humour with death and dying. He was like, I didn't know you could laugh about it. Anyway, which then opened up the conversation about talking about our own death and what we would want. And then we discussed, and everybody gave different preferences. And this young lad then went home and carried on that conversation. One of the things he said is, well, make sure you tell somebody what your wishes are. Well, he must have carried on with that conversation at home, because sadly he passed away 8 weeks later. And 2 weeks ago, his funeral included what he wanted, which was a camper van as a hearse, and a wicker coffin, and he wanted to be buried under trees. And I'm sure it gave his parents comfort to know that they could carry out his wishes. And there's another young person, part of that group, who was really shy when he came to us. But having gone through the experience of those two bereavements, we've seen him grow in confidence to make the most of the life that they've got. So my last slide, just to summarise then what Murray Hall does in community development approach. So we care for people in the last year of their life. We're continuing to develop compassionate communities. We're working with an older generation to reduce isolation and increase participation and make connections for them. We're working with the younger people with life limiting illness, again, to reduce isolation and to develop appropriate care and support, and to build their self-esteem and confidence and aspirations for themselves. Thank you, ladies.
Thanks to Manjula for a fantastic presentation. I think what we'll do is press on. If we have just a little bit of time, Julian will signal to me to put for questions. Otherwise, please talk to Manjula over the break. From a public health perspective, knowing Samuel, that was absolutely amazing, but I didn't know everything that you were doing, all the detail of compassionate communities, so absolutely super, and I'm sure everybody enjoyed it. It's now my great pleasure to introduce Elizabeth Byaliss, Chief Executive of Social Action for Health. Elizabeth has been running Social Action for Health for 16 years, and it's an innovative community development charity working with local people from marginalised communities, again something very dear to our health and our heart in public health, and trying to tackle inequalities. She's also been promoting cross-cultural engagement in the public arena. The thing I really like is the next bit from her biography. So she ran a research and development unit in Hackney, again a very deprived and multicultural area, but came to the conclusion after 12 years that the NHS could not alone crack the problems that were presented to the population, especially on health inequalities, and so decided to do something in a different way, which I hope we're going to hear about today. And she's currently studying reflective social practice on an international master's programme. So thank you very much, Elizabeth. We're looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here. I feel the need to make contact with you because you're just a sort of sea of faces at the moment. So I'm wondering if I might just ask you to tell me what it's been like. I only got here last night, I'm afraid. I missed out. So give me just words, throw words at me about what it's been like.
Fantastic.
Inspiring.
Fantastic.
I can't hear what you say.
Fantastic.
Fantastic.
Energizing.
Energizing. Good.
Fascinating.
Fascinating.
Mind-blowing.
Mind-blowing. Wow.
Encouraging.
Encouraging.
Humbling.
Humbling.
Heartwarming.
Heartwarming. What was over here?
Reinforcing.
Reinforcing. Ah, great. What are you doing here? Great. Oh, well, that's happening. I think I have to press. I'm not going to say much about social action. I'm going to say much more about the work that we've been doing around compassionate communities. But just to contextualise a bit, social action is we're quite an established community development organisation, completely always looking for money, struggling not to be compromised by that search for money, and frequently we are. But we try to hold our values together, and these are they, and they do help, actually. They do help in the permanent, constant struggle not to be compromised. We start with the people, and that's a really important one. We start then with the people, actually, and that sort of feels like that sets the tone for what we do. We don't have to compromise when it comes to the hospice, though. The relationship with St Joseph's Hospice has been very, very exciting and creative for social action. The hospice, St Joseph's Hospice in Hackney, has been around a long time. It's very, very well established and it's very posh. I just went to another hospice the other day, and that was very posh too, but it had frills. And so people feel that they need to sort of dress up before they come in. So when it comes to starting with the people, we have done a lot of work over many years, funded by the hospice, to ask local people. And of course in East London, our local people are from all over the world. We are honoured to have more diversity in London now than New York. That makes for a fabulously rich mix. And it means that we can reach people who are from the four corners. And we've asked people from these four corners about death and dying over many years now. We've had lots of discussions. And what we came to the conclusion was that death is a social process. Now, this is obvious to you, being into compassion, but it was a bit of a shock at first. And the first time I stood on a platform at St Joe's, and said death is a social process and the medics should get out of the way, there was real nerves and crossiness around the room. People were very frustrated about it. But people are very wonderful now. The hospice has learned in a way that blows me away really about what we have to say. And so the consultants participate, they listen. There's lots of detail we could go into that, but I won't be able to now, but I can talk about it. The consultants are a very special body, and so the nurses. There's a shift that feels like embracing with St Joseph's Hospice over the years that we've been involved, and it's a marvellous thing to see. When we go back out into the community and we ask people about death and dying, without exception, people are very keen to take responsibility to be part of it. They want to be part of caring for the people who are their loved ones, who are dying, and they feel that it's a part of their claim to life. It doesn't just enhance their quality of life, their life depends upon being able to work creatively and spontaneously with the people around them who are dying. They want to be part of the action. So, when we first heard of the work that they were doing in Kerala, St Joseph's introduced the idea of compassionate communities through Alan Kelleher, but her work in Kerala was terribly inspiring. Seeing these young guys in Kerala engaged in supporting somebody who was at the end of their life was a wonderful thing. And so we've been working now on developing a compassionate community for a while. And we now have these people who are compassionate neighbours. We have selected 70 people. We have been inundated with people who want to learn more about being compassionate neighbours. We have selected only 70 of them. 70 is a lot. They come from all over the world. I'll tell you about that in a minute. And they want to learn, but really they know how to care. They want to be legitimated. They want to be part of a movement. They want to be part of something. So this is a very exciting thing that's emerging from the work, the training that we're doing. We run an 8-week course, 4 hours a week. Everybody gets to do homework, and the homework for people who don't have writing, not competent in their writing, they can remember and talk, and the homework is all about reflective practice. So last week we had a session, the homework was about remembering the time when you have been kind to somebody, describe the situation, and then describe what it felt like. And I'll tell you about what they said later. We have practice development meetings which carry on after the training is finished, so the sense of network is being built between the participants. We already have compassionate neighbours trained, and you've met the wonderful Pat. Yes, she's over there. She's one of the first group of people who trained and is active as a compassionate neighbour in Hackney. We trained about 14 people in the first cohort, but we have only 3 live compassionate neighbours now, because the whole process, we were learning, it took time, there were delays, there were all sorts of issues that had to be sorted, and so we lost people. But the people who have kept faith in the whole thing are wonderful and are busy being compassionate neighbours now. They meet together, and as the group grows and our programme, our cohorts grow and get into being compassionate neighbours, they will join into a big practice development meeting monthly, so they have a sense of being part of a community themselves. This is really important. The course is all about learning to pay attention. We say that the greatest gift you can give somebody is that of attention, one-to-one. To be present and to be aware of yourself in the mix. So we have all sorts of horror stories about people being escorted across the road and they don't want to go across the road. And being aware of self means that you are learning to reflect on your interior world, and that feels very important. If you look at the world, you're looking through your own eyes, and you see what you select to see. And that feels very important when we're doing this work of being a compassionate neighbour, because people are going into people's homes and they might see somewhere that's really messy. Now, we've got, lots of us are control freaks, and so you can just imagine somebody going into somebody's home and the first thing they want to do is hoover. Well, actually, it might be the last thing that somebody wants, who is there on their own, really fed up and really, really isolated and depressed. They just might feel like you're telling them they're dirty. So this sort of awareness all the time, working with the tension between what you bring yourself, what your own urge is, and what the person who you're working with wants, and how to bring out what they want, and to be shaped by what they're saying to you they want in their life. That's the training is all about that. So focus on listening, focus on observing, observing a leaf, observing a tree, getting people to be increasingly specific in what they observe. And so for the first week in this training, people come with these big, broad generalizations, like a tree, brown, roots in the earth, leaves. That's what you get. You get some really, really broad. And by week 4, we've just done week 4 now. The week 4 training, people were starting to be specific. When I helped my neighbour, this is what I had. This was the equipment. This was the colour, and the picture goes with it. And the specificity starts to emerge, which is what you want if you're going to be paying attention to a situation you're in. You need to be specific about it. It's not just a carpet. It's a carpet with circles on it. It's not just a 45-year-old woman, it's a 45-year-old woman who is wearing a floral dress. The specificity of it is very important in terms of our human engagement one with the other. And the idea of the training is that over this course of time, when people learn to observe, because by observing you are engaging, you're building a relationship. You are building your ability to be confident enough that you can take autonomous action. These people who are compassionate neighbours are not employees, they're volunteers. They need to be able to make a decision and stick with it, even though they're frightened. And they will find situations they're in where they will be frightened. So they have a phone number, and Sally's there at the end of the phone, but people need to be able to make a decision in the spontaneity and the reciprocal relationship they've got. So they aren't coming from on high with a set of instructions. They're there on their own terms, choosing to do this work for themselves. So autonomy is very important. Now, who they are young. We've got some young men, I'm delighted to say, in their early 20s, and we've got some elderly people, Caribbean and German woman, older, in their 80s. Men and women, quite a good mix of men and women, all these different communities listed here. But I missed off one which is very important, which is Chinese, actually. We have a Chinese woman. And that's really good because when we've done our outreach over the years, it's been really difficult to reach the Chinese community because people say, oh no, you can't talk about death because you bring it about. But she's there with us, and she's really active. She's going to make a great compassionate neighbour. So they really are doing lots of work in compassion already, but they're very pleased to be engaging with people. The learning they do is all about them. It's all completely interactive, so they tell us their stories, and they're sharing their stories. Do you, and the cultural specificity is now coming out. Do you look into somebody's eyes if they're a lot older than you? If you're a young Bengali woman, you tend to look down to show respect if you're with an older person. If you're a compassionate neighbour, though, you can't be looking down all the time. That's not a relationship, that's a sort of respectful hierarchical thing. So how does it work to get to a situation where you're feeling peer-to-peer with somebody who might be a bit older than you? These conversations have started to take place across the group, which is very exciting. People are keeping on saying they're glad to be part of something bigger. But the key thing about this lesson last week that we had, I was so excited about it. They did this homework, what were an act of kindness that they've done. And people were giving their homework and saying, describing their acts of kindness, which were very wonderful, and people were getting very energized about it. But what I noticed was that 3 of them said the word relief. They were relieved to be able to care. And that just said it. Everybody said, yes, that's right. It's like naturally we want to be caring and supporting each other, but somehow our society sort of blocks us and stops us and puts all sorts of fear in the way. And one young man was saying, when I came to this country, they said to me, if you see somebody in the street and they're fallen down, collapsed, don't go near them because they'll think it's you did it. Isn't that awful? So everybody in the room was horrified and outraged. The energy was completely enormous. So we had some visitors from this conference, and they were hearing this sort of huge noise coming out, people expressing their indignation and also their joy of being able to find this when they can care. Human beings care for each other. We are all one. So after the training, everybody gets assessed. Yes, is this person going to make a good compassionate neighbour or not? And we think one or two won't. 1 or 2 can't see beyond themselves. So they're all the time talking about themselves, and they can't see the other. So we won't be able to use them as compassionate neighbour. We'll find something else for them to do. But the otherness, the ability to see the other, is completely vital. They'll all be DBS checked, and we've had one person who hasn't got through, and who can't. DBS check, people get the DBS checked, and then the hospice makes completely careful decisions about whether somebody is okay, even though they might have a prison record. And most people are getting through. One person hasn't because the prison record was simply too recent, which I think is fair enough. But we warn people, we work in working class communities where prison life is a reality for many people, so we have to be alert to it. St. Joseph, I trust that St. Joseph are being very careful with that. We have our own procedures in social action, but these are Joe's volunteers, and so it's very important that that feels comfortable. And we've worked through that one. We are doing a matching process, and so the people who are the compassionate neighbours are developing their own story of themselves, and the people who are asking for a compassionate neighbour a profile is done on them as well. So we can try and match, it's no good matching a young Bengali woman who's completely frightened of dogs with a household where you've got 3 German shepherds. It just won't work. But it's very difficult to get people to talk the rich story of their lives. So we did it by interview, but that didn't sort of work between each other. And now we've gone back and it's homework to come back. Some people aren't confident that they can write this, and so they are somebody's helping them write it down. So we have as rich a picture of somebody as we can get. And one of the things that Sally said, which is very interesting from the hospice, is that there's a lot of people, of course, in the area who might be interested in having a compassionate neighbour, but people are thinking about it. They're not saying, yeah, great, tomorrow, please. They're saying, that's going to be interesting to see how that works out. Practice development meetings I've already talked about. And that's it. Just to say that we have the compassionate, these compassionate neighbours are very confident about talking about themselves, and they just, they are building their own relationships, which feels completely key. This won't sustain itself without they build their own relationships with each other. And that's what's starting to happen now, I'm pleased to say. So watch this space.
Thank you very much for your presentation. 3 key things that I remember from Elizabeth's presentation is the relief to care. Don't leave it to the experts, life and death. I quickly wrote that down. And also that death is a social process. And I, like many colleagues in this room, are working with our medical colleagues to demedicalise death. I think we've got 5 minutes to take some questions. So does anybody have questions for Elizabeth and Manjula? Would you both like to step up here so we can use the mics? Yes, please. Can you say your name? I know colleagues probably know you already, but just in case there are people just here. Would you like to?
Rob Byaliss from UK.
Thank you.
Questions for both. Number 1, would you accept doctors on the compassionate labour training, or perhaps provide a model for medical schools or GP training? I think it'd be fantastic.
Yes, if they were passing the test. And the test is about how to listen, whether you can listen, whether you can work with other people, whether you can pay
attention. As a GP, every patient comes in and tells me a story, but often they come and tell me the story that they think I want to hear. And my question is, how can we encourage, without being too explicit, to get the story, the real story?
We found that people will tell us things that they wouldn't tell their doctor.
So how can I get that?
I think it's something to do with,
I want to hear it too.
well, it's about lowering the professional boundaries then, because I think they see us alongside them, whether they may see you with your limited time. You know, they know that you've got limited time, they know nurses have got limited time. So it's about lowering our professional boundaries, I think. We did public health did an evaluation on our care coordinators, and they went and talked to the clinical nurse specialist at the hospital, who most of our referrals come from, to ask them what they thought the benefits were. And what they said was that by us being involved, people talk about all the little things that bother them, their daily living. So then when they had the consultation with their clinical team, they could focus it on the things that they knew that they could address.
I think it's often a question of setting. So if you see a patient in surgery, you'll get one story. If you see them at home, you'll get one.
Yes, please.
Malcolm Byaliss, Chief Executive for Memorial Community Trust. On the introductions this morning, it says we've now legitimised compassionate communities. I'll just put a word of warning. We don't make another profession of compassionate communities, because you've seen that in counselling, you know, where basically just friends come and talk to each other, and we've made another profession out of it. And one of the things I was very keen in developing our coordinators, that we don't set up another set of professions, because I believe power is a limited resource, you know, and people talk about, professionals talk about, well, let's empower people. Yes, you know, but it means giving power away. And that's the really hard bit, really. We've got to really make, and that's not to undermine clinicians, but it's got to be doctors on tap, not on top.
So, thank you. I think both Manjula and Elizabeth would like to come back.
Yes, what I was going to say.
Okay, let Elizabeth step in, and you will remember.
Yeah.
Yes, I absolutely agree. I think that Michel Foucault, who's a favourite of mine, said that professionals have an exclusive control of knowledge, and we have to be very careful about that in our society. I think we're over-dominated by professionals. So we need people who come with a different, from a different starting point. So well said.
Remembered. One of the things that Malcolm's always said to me is that in community development, you work to do yourself out of a job. I think that's the difference.
That's very good. And actually, going back to the earlier point, there is a groundswell of, I'll ask public health doctors, so forget the doctor bit, who are missing the one-to-one contact with patients. And I've been talking to a lot of colleagues who would like to do the volunteering work of some sort. So I will go back, and every time somebody mentions it to me, I will make a suggestion that they consider it. But there are quite a lot of us out there who've been out of clinical medicine for a long time, but actually feel the need and relief. Actually, we're feeling a burden that somehow we are not doing that one-to-one contact that we were also trained to do. So that's good. One last question. Sorry, I've got two. If they can be quick, let me take the two. Oh, we've got three. Yes.
That this conference has been also an inclusivist language, and it's been difficult to understand a lot of doctors. And I think that's unfair, and you wouldn't allow it against any other group. So I'm really shocked that your thinking suddenly needs a value, because most doctors, they do have a lot of knowledge, but they've gained it home. And if they are slightly suspended, you need to be compassionate to them as well as to why they need to.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that comment. One hand over there. Thank you.
I'm very sorry to think about really struck by the statement on one of the slides, to learn or rather to have a way of being acknowledged.
Yeah.
And I just would like to echo that and see what your experiences of the hospice changing or your own experience in education changing, but acknowledging the compassion that these cultures and communities bring that's inherent to them that we want.
Yes, it's the glory of the work, really, that people come. You find we have, one of our groups has 30 people in it, which is a lot. And so, but all these people from all over the world, and after people talking about their own stories and their own experiences of being compassionate, you feel completely honoured and overwhelmed by them. And the eagerness that people bring to communicate with each other cross-culturally is something that's very exciting. So we have these rich conversations emerging. You know, with an African man, an older African man, talking about the ways, the etiquette, the ways of being around care and compassion in West Africa, and then you have a Somali woman talking about what it's like in Britain and in Somalia, and you have the Chinese talking about it. It's absolutely wonderful. And what comes through is that people are really see that life is about us being one and us being unified. And so every time I say, I sum up and say something like, we human beings are one. We are in one world. We are all connected, one with the other, which is something that I say quite a lot. The room erupts. Yes, yes, yes. And so it's just all there. And our society, all our media doesn't talk about it, but it's all there on the ground. It's a wonderful thing to be part of.
Thank you. You want to say just a quick word, and then we'll pass over to Julian.
I always say this, but start with the person, because we come with lots of labels, but we should never make assumptions. So if you start with the person and listen to their story, you understand where they're coming from, and I think that, and then you pick up what's important to them. But you should never make assumptions just because someone has a label.
Thank you. Well, thanks to both our speakers.
I hope very much Simon Nobel is here. Come on, come on, come on.
I think that one of the things about this conference is that we've seen fantastic partnership and enthusiasm, and there is a need for us to present evidence of what we're doing, because we have to talk to a whole wide variety of different people about how we embed a public health approach. And I'm delighted to say that the BMJ Supported Intensive Care work became partners for this conference and offered to do a session on how to get published, which I think is a really useful skill. It's pretty tricky, and I'm really happy to say that Simon Nobel, who's recently on the board of BMJ Supported Intensive Care, has stepped in the last minute to be able to talk to us. Simon is, I think, still has to get himself in South Wales. And has done an awful lot of work, in particular around blood thinning agents, which is a significant problem in life care. So he's got plenty of good experience on experimental studies and getting published and a whole variety of different things. So thank you very much for stepping in the last minute, and you're most welcome.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Julian. First of all, it's a privilege to be here, and to follow on from two such excellent talks does nothing more than fill me with fear. The way I have to do it is I just have to ask, just thank the previous two speakers for being my warm-up people. Yes, I am Simon, and I'm a doctor. I'm very sorry. I'll get that out there now. But I am also a patient. I had treatment for cancer 17 years ago and have lifelong complications from that. I'm a son who looked after his mother who died of dementia. And so I know some doctors do have their heads up their backsides. That is the nature of the training, sadly. But we're all in it the same. And what I want to say to you is, for those of you who don't think that this talk is of relevance to you, I'd like to challenge that. We've just heard two fantastic talks about innovative work that is going on. And the only way that that excellent work can be reproduced elsewhere is sharing it through conferences, but also sharing it through publications which demonstrate robust evaluation of how good it is. Sadly, or maybe not sadly, it is not enough for us who are in the thick of it to know what we're doing is right. For us to be able to withstand scrutiny from outside of our professions and outside of our specialties, be our specialty being a carer, a nurse, a doctor, a pharmacist, an allied health professional, we need to demonstrate that evidence. If we've learned anything from our experiences with the Liverpool Care Pathway, which I personally feel was a document which really did help people manage the end-of-life care. The difficulty with it was that we did not have the evidence base to demonstrate its benefit. Now that has come out since. There's been work done, there's been RCTs done, And in the very least, what that showed was it did not cause harm. And if we'd had that evidence at the time, I think we would have been able to rebut some of the more specious comments. So that's where I'm standing from. Now, the other thing I want to say is, I never thought I'd be an academic. At medical school, I was the Muppet. In fact, there was some graffiti in the toilet which said, "Great lies. Number 1, I read it in the BMJ. Number 2, I'll respect you in the morning. And number 3, I think Simon Nobel will pass finals first time." I was never the academic. MRCP Part 1 used to be a system where you got negative marking for every question you got wrong. I took it 7 times. I hated negative marking. When I finally got my membership, the trust raised the flag. Some people thought they were royal, some royal birthday happened. No, I'd raised the flag. So I've always constantly felt myself an accidental academic. So let me show you this slide first. Machu Picchu. Wonderful place if you ever get the chance to visit it. And a few years ago, my wife and I went to do the Inca Trail. And these chaps were our wonderful porters. And they were muttering a lot and looking over at me. And I don't speak much Spanish, but what kept our hearing was the word El Gordito. Now, for those who understand Spanish, they were basically talking about fat bloke. And they did not, number 1, they did not think the fat bloke had it in him to finish the trail. And number 2, because they ate whatever was left behind, they felt they were going to starve. And the reason I'm mentioning this is that sometimes we go into things or other people have preconceived ideas. And I want you to throw away this idea that I'm not an academic, I can't do these things, because I never thought myself that. Just as a little aside, getting a week's notice from Bill Nobel to give this talk is a dream. I used to work, well, I still work for Laura Finley. I had a phone call once. Please don't tweet this, by the way. I know who you are. Okay, and I've got my phone on vibrate, so if any of you tweet, I know. Okay. I once got a phone call for Laura Finley at midnight. "Simon, what are you doing tomorrow?" "Well, I think you're about to tell me." Well, I'm presenting at the Welsh Assembly tomorrow, but I've got an opportunity to have tea with the Queen and Jacques Chirac. Could you help me out? And I said, "Well, I'd love to, but I don't speak French." "No, silly. Would you give a talk at the Welsh Assembly government?" And I said, "Of course, yeah, sure." Thinking if you're stupid enough to ask me, you're going to have to deal with the consequences if I get it wrong. And I said, "Any chance you've written the talk?" "Oh, I was going to wing it. You'll be fine." So a week's notice on a subject to actually know something about is a pleasure. So this talk is based on some slides provided to me by Bill on behalf of the BMJ Publishing Group. Some of my own slides. I'm giving a perspective as an editorial board member, but also as someone who does get sent a lot of papers to review. So I kind of understand the role of the reviewer in that sense. And also as the role of a published academic, but also a many time rejected academic as well. Now, no one ever tells you, you know, the gambler who tells you his wins, he never tells you all the times he's lost money. Okay, you lose loads as well. And what I want to really get across is that publication in a peer-reviewed journal is not an impossible task. It is not beyond anyone in this room. So long as you have realistic goals, appropriate access to support, and recognise that it is a learning process. No one's first journal publication is going to be New England Journal of Medicine, having just found a cure for cancer. That ain't going to be the way. Part of what you're doing is learning, so you can go on to the next thing. And if you've got an amazing innovation, or you've done an amazing bit of research, or a service evaluation, or a case report you've read up about, you've already done the work. And if this is going to be of benefit to patients, benefit to carers, benefit to society as a whole, I personally think it's unethical not publishing. I think we have a duty to, especially if we have used the research and development systems of going through an ethics committee to undertake some work. You've taken up a lot of professional time there, you've taken up the time of healthcare professionals, you've taken up the time of patients to be involved in that. I think ethically there's an imperative that we should disseminate that research. The less kind of good reasons for doing it, but you may still kind of move us on. It looks good on the CV. It looks good for your organisation, your boss or your masters. For those of you who no one listens to you when you're at work, it's lovely to have an audience where you're sat there and got to listen to me. So an opportunity to present is fun. And some people may actually say this is actually where I see my career going. Miriam Johnson, Professor of Palliative Medicine at Hull York Medical School, is doing amazing stuff in breathlessness now. She only went into academia, about 12 years ago. It's gone up the ladder very quickly and is doing great stuff. So where submit? Well, I sometimes unkindly say you can get anything published in a Mickey Mouse journal. You want to get it in a decent journal. But actually what you've really got to think about is where you want to send your message. Is it something that's specific to palliative care? Is it specific to kind of health services delivery? Is it specific to end-of-life care? Or is it something wider? And that should influence you. Within palliative care, there are lots of different journals out there now. The main staple, I think, in the United Kingdom would be BMJ Supportive of Palliative Care, Palliative Medicine. These are more American, so have you got a message to give that is of interest across the globe rather than just in the UK? European Journal of Palliative Care? I think from the point of view of publishing, they're actually a very good place if you've got service development or you've got a little review you want to do of something or sharing an innovation. That's a good place to go. It doesn't get cited on, in PubMed and things like that, but it gets out to a lot of people. EAPC have a large number of members. Maybe the place to go. Also, there are a lot of online rapid access journals now. Now, the good things about these is if you're busy and you want your paper to be turned around quickly, they turn around quick. The review process is very transparent. In fact, you can usually see the review comments and then what you say, so you can see the whole conversation. Very open like that. Tends to be widely read and cited because it's on the internet, anyone can get it, but it does cost. And I think that's often the downside to it. But I think that is where a lot of publication may be going in the future. So just think about where you want to publish. Where is the message you want to get it out to? So get familiar with those journals. If palliative medicine doesn't tend to take that sort of stuff, don't waste your time formatting it for them, sending it off. Actually see who your target audience is. Where is it edited, UK, States, and please read guidelines for authors. No point in writing a wonderful 4,000-word essay for a journal that will only take 2,000 words. These are the kind of schoolboy/schoolgirl errors. 3 parts of writing any paper. There's a cover letter where you ask the editors to actually go on and read it, the abstract and the manuscript. Now, I'm going to talk most about the manuscript, but can I stress the abstract? Do not underestimate its importance. I'll show that to you later, that many journals don't even read the paper first. They will look at the abstract and decide, is this of interest? And if you put in a crummy abstract, they'll reject immediately. It's a bit kind of like, the first impressions at an interview, or first impression when you go and meet someone. That is the bit they look at. And what often happens is you're submitting your paper, you've uploaded your paper, and they suddenly go, oh, now can you put in the abstract? You go, oh, I haven't done it. Oh, I'll just bung something in there. Actually, you need to put a lot more effort into that bit. So these are some of the sort of more BMJ slides. Really, you've got to ask, and this is talking about research, but it's any message you're trying to get across. What is the question? What is it you're trying to answer? And is this the right format? Sometimes a short report is much better than a full academic paper. Sometimes an editorial or an opinion piece may be better. One of my favourite publications I wrote was a little short report on confusion during the eclipse called Sundowning on a Sunny Day in Cornwall, where 50% of our patients got confused as the sun went down, the other 50% didn't, and there were reasons for that. It's a nice little story. I wasn't going to write an academic paper on it, but I wrote something there just to share an interesting thing I saw. And what do you think the audience needs to know? So when writing a research paper, the IMRAD basically is introduction, methods, results, and discussion. That is a fairly standard way of doing it. And the introduction is setting the scene, telling people why you're writing something of relevance, why it's worth them reading it. The methods is going to be an idea of what you did, and actually based on what you've said there, could it be reproducible? The results will show what you found, and then the discussion is I'm talking about what it might mean, and we'll give you more detail of this. So the introduction, 3 to 4 paragraphs only. It's a brief background. It is not a full systematic review. It is not an opportunity for you to say, look how clever I am and how well I know it. What you're trying to say is, this is what we currently know, here are the gaps, and that is why we have done this. And if that is boring, and I'm a reviewer and I'm looking at this bit's boring, oh, I've got a whole paper now to read, you've lost me already. The people who read these things are human. But if you can get their interest at that point, some punchy statements at the beginning, some important facts which tell me why this is of relevance. And the methods is very much like a recipe, and it depends on what style of method you've been using. My advice would be, look at the journal you're going for, look at how they present their methods, and also think about the audience. Give you a good example. As Julie mentioned, some of my research is into thrombosis treatments. Now, for me, one of the important things is, in the world of thrombosis, hematologists, oncologists, they know all the molecular biology, they know all the epidemiology, the pathophysiology. What they don't know about is the patient experience and the patient journey. And for me to share data with them on that, I'm having to write papers on qualitative research. And lab-based scientists don't understand qualitative research. They go, only 20 patients, where's your p-value? Yeah? So when you talk about methods there, you need to give them more information and explain more to them about it than if, for example, I was writing that in a qualitative journal or a palliative care journal. There are usually standard ways of reporting, and the journal will have that there. They will be giving you the guidance. For the results, prose for description of what you're doing for the story, tables to back that up with the evidence, figures to highlight the important bits. Some journals will have a maximum number of tables or figures. If it's qualitative, you're going to be having your quotes there, that's your data. Bill put in, said confidence intervals, essential summary statistics. My advice, if you've got stats in there, you need a statistician. I don't know the first thing about stats. I can talk a good game, but I don't do any stats without a statistician's involvement. So if you're doing numbers, get a statistician involved, preferably before you start the study rather than the end. If you really want to hack off a statistician, you go up to with all these numbers and go, find me a p-value less than 0.05. Okay, it's a bit like kind of a speech and language therapist, you know, being kind of, oh, they don't have a gag reflex, then, you know, they're swallowing good. You know, it's that kind of narrow view that that's all there is to that role. And then a discussion. What have you found? What's the relevance of it? Strengths and weaknesses. If you aren't able to critically evaluate your own work, I can promise you the reviewer will. So preempt it with what you think the strengths and weaknesses are. Why is this good? Why should this be published? What is important about it? What are the weaknesses? Doesn't matter if it's got weaknesses so long as you acknowledge them. And this data can be interpreted in the context. What does this study mean? And what are the unanswered questions? And what is just the future research? And can I just make one plea? If you think further research is needed, say what sort of research. Don't just say more research is needed. Yeah, I know that. Yeah, you know, it's just one of my things. You know, more research is needed, absolutely. But what is it? You've done a seminal bit of work here, which is saying these are the gaps. How are we now going to take it forward? As I said, don't underestimate the importance of the abstract. It's got to be concise, focused, relevant, and readable. Some of you will be familiar with Andrew Wilcox. Andrew Wilcox has done a lot of good work. I wrote a paper with him once. It was the most miserable experience of my life. It was one of the most formative experiences as well, because Andrew drummed into me every word counts. So he basically gave me a kicking, because one of my problems is my style of writing is too chatty. And he honed it down, and I'd send it off to him, and he'd give me another kicking, and there'd be red marks over everything, because this was pre-internet and emails and stuff. and he'd give me a good old slapping, and I hated him by the end of it. Now I love him to bits because he actually taught me some very good skills. And this is one of Bill's slides, I'm going to blame him for this one. But it just gives you an overview of an abstract. And if I can give you any advice, there are many conferences here, we've had abstracts submitted. A good way of learning how to write an abstract is submitting abstracts. Because then you've got to be concise, you've got to be focused. It's a good way of learning your skills. The review process, and I can see this from the side of an editorial board, on the side of someone reviewing, and the side of someone who's put work through. There's you. What you tend to do is you submit your paper and it goes to an editorial board. The format of the editorial board will pretty much depend on how big, how popular that journal is, whether it's just going across the desk of someone who happens to be on the editorial board, have a look at this, what do you think? Some big places will charge you just to submit it. Journal of Clinical Oncology, you have to put $50 in for them to then get reviewers. But the editorial board, BMJ supporting palliative care, palliative medicine, they will have a couple of people who will look at that abstract, decide to read the paper or not, and will then make a decision whether or not to send it out. Sometimes it gets rejected immediately. BMJ, 50% of papers do not get past that stage. There'll be instant rejection. Now the good thing about this is actually you stop wasting your time there. I often submit to the BMJ just for a laugh to see how quick it takes them to reject me. Okay? It's like me going up to a beautiful lady at a disco and I go, actually, don't bother. Okay, fine. I haven't even wasted any time. I haven't even opened my magic bag. Just don't put yourself through it. And that's a little bit like the way the BMJ can be with you as well. If they're going to reject you, they will reject you quick. So this is often what's happened in my past. Now, for what it's worth, I'm married to the most wonderful, beautiful woman in the world. She's fab. She tempers me. She keeps me kind of my frontal lobe behaviour under a little bit. But you know what? I would never have had the guts to kind of go up to her or court her had I not been ready to be rejected by her, knowing so. But you know, she's wonderful, but crumbs, you know, I'd have never thought someone that out of my league I'd have gone for in the past. I've got to say it took 8 years of wearing her down, but that's persistence, that's important as well. So sometimes you get immediately rejected, and rejection is part of the process as well, I'm afraid. Sometimes what happens, and out of all those BMJ rejections, once I put one in, and they sent it off. I couldn't believe it. I was almost like, are you serious? You actually sent it off. So the editorial board will send it out to reviewers. Minimum of 2 reviewers, usually people who know the subject matter, so they can at least look and say, is this person talking about the right stuff? Now there are times they may send it out to your nemesis, who is the one person you don't want to read it because they're going to reject you anyway because of Nobel, that git. You know, he thinks it's funny and I'm going to slap him down. So they may reject you. Sometimes you can actually say who you don't want as a reviewer. Minimum of 2 reviewers, sometimes more, especially if their statistics need reviewing. And they will then come back with their advice. Now, when I've reviewed, and most reviewers, they will be asked to talk about the originality, the content of it, the structure, the design of the study or design of the report. Have the authors interpreted things correctly? How important is it? If you say, look, this is well written, but, ooh, you know, you kind of told me that, you know, being sick isn't nice. We'd suss that one. Yeah, if you've given me a little bit more about it, we may actually, but, you know, kind of saying nothing new is unlikely to get people's attention. Is it suitable for our journal? You often find that, you know, you'll put something in on palliative care to a different journal, they go, no, it's not for us. You should submit to a palliative care journal. When actually, if you're doing good work and you want the rest of the world to know about it, you want it to be in the wider area. And a good journal, as far as I'm concerned, will say, look, if you don't think this is acceptable at the moment, can anything be done to make it acceptable? To me, that's a good journal. And if someone says, no, look, this is just not for you, fine. But if they say, well, you know what, if they change this and they change that, there may be something here. And I've reviewed papers before where I said, look, as a paper, I'm not that impressed, but this bit of data here is really important. And you get that out as a short report, that's worth doing. The editors then have the final say. And I've seen some editors tip one that's borderline, tip it over. I've seen some as well as borderline going, nah, I really didn't fancy it. But they will give you feedback, and it tends to be one of these things. It's either reject, resubmit with amendments, and those are either minor amendments or major rewrite, or resubmit as something else, or accept as is. Can I tell you, there is no such thing as accept as is? And I'll tell you why. Because a reviewer needs to demonstrate they've read it. So a reviewer who goes, yeah, look great, publish, they'll go, did you actually read it? So they have to go, I really think if you tweaked that, and or just show how clever I am, I think such and such. And the real sneaky ones will go, have you considered putting in also referencing Nobel et al. 2015? Yeah, I've seen that. In fact, I once had a paper in which the reviewer suggested I've done this review paper, and part of it, I cited a review article, and the review article was in the New England Journal of Medicine. Okay, so I thought that's probably the review paper to submit. The reviewer comes back and goes, that first review article, I think you're much better off citing so-and-so et al. In the Minnesota Journal of Nothingness. But look, you reckon, are you the reviewer by any chance? It was. It was like, I want to get my citations. So why do people reject papers if it's badly written? I have on one occasion sent a paper back because after reading 4 paragraphs, I had made 20 corrections to the writing. And it was like, I'm busy enough, I can review papers, but I'm not going to proofread an article. And if you are not going to give me the respect of writing this well, you're expecting me to spend all this time as well. So I actually sent it back and said, look, if this is proofread, I'll have a look at it, but I can't be kind of, marking this, it's not school. Sometimes it's unoriginal, sometimes the evidence doesn't convince. I'm going, I need something else to convince me that this is right, or I don't think they've interpreted it. Or it may not be right for the target audience. There was a very interesting paper by Katie Urch on cancer-associated bone pain put in Palliative Medicine Journal. Really good. But actually, I remember when Jeff Hanks put it in, he said, I don't know if the audience is going to really enjoy this. But it was a great paper, and it may have been better in a different journal, but it was great. So this is Bill's How to Please Editors and Peer Reviewers. Don't break the rules. Don't put stuff in if you haven't got consent to use that data. Plagiarism, yeah, absolutely. Double publishing, the salami technique. When we teach on the MSc, and we kind of say, look, you've got a good message, publish it, but don't do this thing of, why publish once when I can publish the same stuff 4 times and just tweak it a little bit? Don't necessarily do that. Don't break word count limit, immediate rejection, schoolboy error, schoolgirl error again. Make sure the message is clear in the paper and abstract, not just the cover letter. Some journals don't even bother reading the cover letter. The strobe checklist. Sometimes people will go through and make sure you've covered all the important bits in the paper. So it's worth seeing whether this journal wants you to cover those things. And this is interesting because you will cite the right papers, but Bill actually encourages you to send papers in as well. And I'm in a situation at the moment where I have a paper which is out to review, and a reviewer came back and said, oh, I don't agree that they've misinterpreted such and such a paper. And so what I did was I sent the paper on and highlighted and said, no, actually it's exactly what they've said. So sometimes using, citing something isn't enough. Send previous peer review reports sometimes, if they've said, for example, BMJ, and this is a little technique which is interesting. BMJ, you submit something to them, they may say, oh, you're better off putting it in BMJ supportive and palliative care. Then you can send to them whatever reviews you've already had on it. Do the correct formatting, I've said. If in doubt, give them a ring. Actually, they tend to be very helpful. If no one submits to a journal, that journal ceases to exist. Now, I don't ever think the New England Journal of Medicine or BMJ are going to cease to exist, but there are other journals that the minute people stop publishing with them, their metrics go down, and that's a problem to them. If in doubt, communicate with the journal. I've said, always read your paper out loud. My poor friends, if I'm writing something, I'll be ringing them and saying, oh, listen to this, what do you think? And I can just hear them snoring in the background. But certainly if I'm writing something potentially controversial, I will sound out a few friends to make sure the language and the tone is actually appropriate. I've just got myself into, I don't know if I've got myself into trouble, but I'll share it with you so you can read it. There's recently been a paper in the Journal of Pain and Symptom Management looking at octreotide. It's the first time that there has been an adequately powered, placebo-controlled, randomized control trial looking at octreotide and malignant bowel obstruction. Well done, adequate numbers, well stats. Didn't show any difference in the primary endpoint, which was the number of times someone was sick. Did show an increase in the use of busstopan, with a suggestion, therefore, that maybe octreotide may actually have increased harm. Now, the paper did not say you should not use this, but it said, this is an issue we need to consider, that currently this is our standard treatment, are we sure we need to be doing this? And an eminent colleague wrote in their editorial, I don't think we need to worry about this shouldn't deter us because we've got 20 years experience of it anyway. And I kind of, myself and a colleague said, well, what's the point in doing evidence-based medicine? Yeah. So we wrote a letter, didn't pull any punches, read it out to a few friends. Did they want to put their name on it or no? It was him, it was Nobel again. And I recognise that, a publication against an editorial is not the civil rights movement, but Dr. Luther King said, for evil to prevail, good people just have to sit back and do nothing. Now, I'm not saying that's on any part, please don't. What I'm saying is, my ego does not go that high. But what I am saying is, prepared to challenge ourselves. And why? Because palliative care was born of radicals. Wherever you see palliative care starting, Cicely Saunders and the people who supported her work turned on its head the way end-of-life care has been delivered. You tell me she wasn't a radical? You tell me she didn't challenge the current zeitgeist of society at the time? So we shouldn't be afraid now, in whatever area we're doing, to actually be prepared to challenge, but also to challenge each other. And I think one of the problems we have at the moment in our field, sometimes we call it terminal niceness. I don't want to speak out because that'd be very rude. It really wouldn't be the done thing because, after all, so-and-so's done a lot of work in this field. We've got to be challenging for our patients. If we didn't challenge our practice, radical bilateral mastectomies would be the standard of care for breast cancer still. If we didn't challenge practice, Helicobacter pylori eradication with a few tablets would not have been, or we'd still be having vagotomies and pyloriclasties. And we need to be able to challenge from within as well. And only by doing that will we stand up to scrutiny from outside. And we want to stop this inside-outside thing. We've got to be prepared to take the challenges and the criticisms. And we mustn't be afraid to be as radical and challenging in what we do as our forefathers, mothers, persons have been. There's still so much work for us to do. We mustn't be afraid to challenge. This is showing Bill wrote this one. Write well, like Hemingway, not Tolkien. I'm afraid I've not really read any Hemingway. I'm sorry. I am sorry. I've drunk in the bar he used to frequent in Cuba, and I've actually drunk in the hotel where he wrote Farewell to Arms. I've drunk in the pub where Tolkien is. This is not a good message I'm giving out. And what he's trying to say is, I tend to be a very chatty writer, and that is not good for academic papers. You've got to write fairly straight wicket here. Don't try and be flowery with your words. And don't say what you don't mean. So if you have a message, give that message. Say it once, don't say it twice. Something Andrew Wilcock always told me, you know, don't double up on things. And no adverbs. Now, I think this is really important. If I hear someone say, you know, it was disappointingly, this did not show. No, you're a scientist here. You're not a kind of expressing, you know, that kind of view. It is absolutely vital that this is done immediately. Immediate action must be made to do this. You're stating facts. You're not putting in emotion to this. The emotion can come in the editorial or the opinion piece, but not in the establishment of the facts. Because otherwise you're suggesting bias. No, yeah, exclamation marks, don't do it to me. And by the way, anyone involved in care plans, clinical notes, don't put exclamation marks, that's saying an opinion as well. I've got one Reg who cowers when he sees me now because he wrote an exclamation mark after some of my management on a patient. The fact that he was a muppet and didn't understand what was happening, but still judged he disagreed with it, is now in public record there. And he's got a big marker pen with an exclamation mark on his head. He can't rub off yet. And there better be a good reason for quotation marks. Quotation marks are when you're quoting something, be it what patients said verbatim, or if you are specifically quoting what has been put in another style. But if you're going, you know, so-called experts say this, and key opinion leaders say this, you know, once again, it's you making an opinion and could be disparaging. It's not going to get any praise. Remember the word limit, or else they'll immediately bat it back. In fact, some websites won't even allow you to get past. It's like Twitter when you're trying to get those, you know, the red stars coming as you're putting your figures in. And if you get a reviewer's comments, address them. Don't have a look. Say, oh, there's loads of comments, I can't do it. Another message from Andrew Wilcock. He's like, this is what it is. Reviewers will write comments, you have to respond to them. If you respond to every comment, it's a lot harder for the editors to reject what you've done. You know, if those are the only things stopping you being published and you can fend each one off, go for it. Bill says reviewers are only human. Yeah, not all. Don't take it personally. I think that's reasonable. Remember, reviewers do the most important job in science for no pay and no glory. I don't know about that. Some reviewers I hate, some reviewers are great. But what I would say is this. As a reviewer, you have a responsibility. Let's say, no, I'm not going to use that example. It's too close to home. Let's say there was a paper which everyone looked at, everyone took notice of, and then later it turned out that it was a load of rubbish for whatever reason. That there were major ethical concerns, or actually the data integrity was called into question by someone who read the paper. You know what's going to happen? They're going to say, well, who the hell reviewed this? And I actually saw someone recently, and I kind of said to him, I think you might have reviewed one of your papers. I said, you were very kind, you pulled no punches. And he goes, look, mate, you know, I thought it was good, but these bits were a problem. And I can't, you know, in 5 years' time, if someone says, what the hell was that paper about, they're going to look at me. And it's absolutely right. It's a bit like writing a reference on someone. You don't write someone a good reference to get rid of them these days. I've known medical colleagues who've been up before the GMC for writing glowing references to get rid of the dysfunctional person, who then got struck off. And the question was, well, who the hell said this person was okay? So a reviewer, a good reviewer, will actually be prepared to put their name to that and say, yeah, this was fine. That's why I'm never bothered about my name being put on a review. If I think it's good, I'll say it's good. If I think it's bad, I'll say it's bad. Co-authors, we're coming to the end, guys. Do you have co-authors? I think someone who writes a piece on their own is lacking the opportunity to get experience from someone, guidance from someone who's been there, done that, and can help you. Elora Finley was amazing at supporting me with some of the publications. And I remember this pattern. I've still got some. I used to keep all my papers, and there's this one paper just covered in green, covered in green. Next time I did a paper with a less green. Next time I did a paper with a few cursory things just to show she'd been there, really, a bit of grammar. Now you've got to be very clear as to what the person has contributed. So I would never have someone on a paper who's not contributed to it in some way. And you've now got to actually state what they have done. Everyone has to earn their place on it. Sometimes it's good for the learning. Sometimes that person then says, oh, you know, I've got a good idea. Do you want to come on board with this? May increase. It's a form of networking. Oh, sorry, do you want that picky? There you go. Nice smile button. But choose wisely. I had a great experience with one paper. Every time I sent it to one of the co-authors, they would send it back with their name at the end, the senior author. I'd put it back, and their name would keep bouncing backwards and forwards. And they started deciding, this is a good paper, I want a piece of this now. But sometimes, you know, you can find you can lose control. You know, loss of authorship even. So actually be very clear as to what contributions have been made, and that will determine who goes where on it. Anyone know this film? Anyone? Oh, you guys are in for a treat. There's a film you should all watch. Night of the Hunter. Robert Mitchum as the preacher. Evil personified. You know this thing of love and hate on the fingers? It was him. This is him. He's the preacher. Love and hate. He was evil. He works his way into this family. Shelley Winters was the mum. It was an amazing film. It is now, it always seems to be in the top 100 movies of all time. A cult classic. Cinematography was amazing. The soundtrack was amazing. And it was actually directed by, do you recognise this guy? Charles Lawton, who got an Oscar for playing Henry VIII. He was the great actor of his time, and this is the first film he ever directed, and it got slammed. And as a result, he never directed another film again, even though history now has this as one of the all-time great films. Rejection is normal in writing papers. It's a rite of passage. And rather than going, I've been rejected, I am rubbish, it is a learning opportunity. Learn from the feedback and do not despair over it, okay? That is just a normal part of it. I remember my first paper, I would be kind of checking every day, where is it in the review process? Where is it? Where is it? Now I'm kind of a little bit like, oh, I forgot to put that one in. It's changed. I mean, that's partly the job I'm in now. But rejection is normal. So don't take any of this personally. Because even El Gordito, the least likely person to make it, can do. So thank you very much for your time. I hope it's been of some use.
Thank you very much, Simon. I hope your phone was buzzing vigorously. I didn't see anything about the story in particular, but and Simon, what Simon was saying about the dance floor was just a lie, actually. I've seen him deliver a lecture in Elvis impersonation costume, doing all the moves, and I'm sure he would have been very successful. Any questions? Thanks.
Hi there. It's more than a question. I just wanted to say I'm encouraged by your talk. And there were two things that really stood out for me. One was don't be afraid to challenge, and the other was unethical not to publish. I work as an expressive movement therapist, talking of dancing. And for most people, Western hospice care is the first hospice I'm aware of that has taken on expressive movement therapy. Everyone said, how can people who are end of life use movement as a form of expression? And I've been working there for many years now, and I did some research, and some amazing things came out from stories that people were telling through their movement about how once your body is ill, that people are losing their capacity to express their sense of self. And these extraordinary stories were coming out, kind of moving and able to adapt to express themselves in new ways. Anyway, I thought I've got to publish this. This is something new. Anyway, I spoke to Julian about it, and I sat on this article for ages thinking, the BMJ is never going to take me. And then I bumped into Julian one day and said, try the International Journal of Palliative Nursing. So I did, and I just wanted to say that I've just heard that they're going to accept it for publication.
That's lovely.
non-directly maybe with people. It's working with creativity rather than any science and measurement, which is really positive. I sort of think if anybody tries to do it, anyone can do it. And the unethical not to publish, I feel like there's a story that my clients were out there to tell me, and I felt like I needed to look out, and that's why I'm here today to speak. So just wanted to say, I hope that if you're inclined to do it,
Could I just follow up to that? Because what it struck a chord with was day hospices are now a normal part of our, our kind of care package, I believe. Most places we have day hospice work. The first published account of a day hospice model was actually in 1975 in the BMJ. That's when it first happened. And I, to my shame, I can't remember who wrote it, but someone said, this is different, this is innovative, and that was published. Now that's, you imagine now, so, well, we have a day hospice, let's publish it. That's not news, is it? Because it's now kind of standard for, the work we do. And the other thing I'd say is what is important is, I'm a clinical academic, I do 60% clinical, 40% academic. It's hard work doing the academic in that. But you have to be mindful. I'm always saying I don't want to be in an ivory tower with no contact, no appreciation of what's happening in the real world. And it's only through people who are involved in day-to-day patient care where you can actually speak out, because you're there, you're at the coalface. And some research has to be done in the academic centres, but if you're not doing it at the coalface and spreading good practice. So I'm delighted, congratulations. And now what you can do is carry on.
Scott.
Scott. Oh, I didn't know you were in the audience.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed it. What would you think about publishing in journals in, say, public health, primary care, or community development?
Absolutely.
And you're hinting for doing that to get our message to a wider community.
I think that, in one sense, I think that would be me kind of teaching mother to suck eggs, since you are someone with a much better experience of primary care. I think what we've got to recognise what is the message that we're trying to get across. I spend the majority of my time trying to publish outside of palliative medicine journals because, community and, by and large, what we're doing in the hospices, we're doing a pretty good job. But actually that is only a small proportion of the patients that we look after. The majority of our patients are at home, are in the community, so we need to be identifying good practice, disseminating that to the people who are involved. So I think some of it is keep plugging away. And also the other thing is there's different reasons for publishing. Sometimes you want to publish because you're an academic unit and your university is going to smack your backside if you don't do a high impact factor. But actually, the reason we really are doing research is because we want to improve patient care. And if there is a paper which will improve patient care by going into a decent target audience who can make a difference. So I think sometimes we have to not shoot so high. The New England Journal of Medicine is unlikely to take stuff. You're going to have to be lucky to get in. But actually, a UK health service journal, I think epidemiological journals as well, communication. I think it all depends on the message. But, Journal of General Practice, to me that is got to be one we're going for. But also, we've got to remember, International Journal of Palliative Nursing, Journal of Advanced Nursing, those are journals which are widely read by people at the coalface. And that's where you want to be influencing the practice as well. And I think sometimes we almost, as a med, going, I'll put it in a medical journal. Actually, no, if this is a condition or this is a situation where it's the nurses in the team who are spending most time, or the occupational therapists, put the message there where the people are going to provide the care and act on it are. I don't know if you've got anything to add there, Scott, because you're much better at this than me.
It's nice to speak.
In the corner, Manjula.
So they haven't got very loud words that actually everybody speaks. So I was looking to get people from this. But what it would be, it wasn't palliative care, it was definitely public health, because to get people in the community to supported to and just to raise awareness on caring, talking about this, it's definitely public health. So, competency, PNC, public health, and got the message back, this is public health, so BMC, palliative care. And we thought, okay, we feel it doesn't matter too much because there's searches on their line and find it anyway. But I wanted to know that how did we start to persuade publishers that it is a public health issue and it is that it's not how to
I think it's a two-pronged
Simon,
attack.
if you could just repeat the question.
Oh yeah, sorry. The question, our colleague has done some work which was is of a palliative slant, to do with end-of-life care, end-of-life wishes, but very much from a public health perspective. And when applying to BMC Public Health, they said, no, it's not for us, put in a palliative care journal. And how do we address this? I think the first thing is it needs a two-pronged attack. There'll be a time when a paper will get sent to reviewers, and those of you who review need to actually be able to say this is exactly the sort of stuff this journal needs to be publishing. I think that's one thing. I got a paper, Journal of Clinical Oncology, asked me to review a palliative care paper. And they said, do you think this is the right thing to do? And I said, you need to be doing this sort of stuff. You actually need to be publishing qualitative research. This is absolutely ideal. So they're looking as well for a bit of a steer, but you've got to get past that hurdle. So I think there, it is actually in the letter where you try and convince them why you think it's important, and maybe even send them a couple of papers. And although I don't think it'll ever work, sometimes when they say we don't think it's for us, we think it's for them, you could write back and say, look, I respectfully disagree for these reasons. They're not going to recant because they're never going to do that, but it just puts it back in their head. And if they continue to see that this is what's coming through. Now, Saatchi once said the problem with judges or editors or people who judge panels is it's very rare that they can actually identify innovation, because all they do is represent what's currently popular. They represent the current zeitgeist. So they're not going to see what in the future is important. So you need to give them a little nudge. And if they keep hearing the same message, it may work.
Julia.
Thank you very much for a lovely presentation. To my colleagues who want to publish in public health journals, I would also refer to your point about thinking about partners. And it's partly about language, so it's about getting the right words into the abstract. So community development, public health people know, but a popular needs assessment, joint strategic needs assessment, there are some words which will fire the editors of public health journals. So work in partnership with a public health colleague who will help them to get the right words into the abstract, that they recognise that this is a public health issue. I really like your point about challenge, and I would support that colleagues, when they read papers that there's something fundamentally wrong, they should challenge it, because we don't want bad science or bad practice being spread. But I would also add to your reasons for publishing to make sure that evidence gets into practice, because I've done quite a lot of work with NICE, and it's a nightmare because we know of tons of good practice which is only published in what they call the grey literature as local reports. And NICE is so strict about the inclusion of evidence that if you have not got it published in a peer-reviewed journal, they won't look at it at all. And we are losing masses of evidence to change practice that everybody else knows about because of very narrow focus when people are doing evidence reviews.
I think NICE is like Ron Burgundy. I don't know if you've ever seen the Ron Burgundy films. Ron Burgundy will, please don't tweet this either. Screw it, you can tweet it. Ron Burgundy will only say what's on the auto cue, and NICE will only make a judgment based on economic evaluation of RCTs, and that is it, and the rest of the data isn't, is very rarely taken into account.
One more question. That's it. We can finish early. Thank you very much. Is
that all right? Yeah, I mean, it's very funny being with you guys. Delighted to come down and help.
helps is the really good conference. I've been following on Twitter actually, some really good stuff. Oh,
Lovely to see you again. Sorry, we were here yesterday. I had to go to London, but I'm glad you're here today. Because I was afraid I was getting lost.
I've just popped off.
Oh, right.
Simon, well done. That was great. Oh, cheers. Big seeing you. I've seen it 3 times in 2 weeks, I think, isn't it? Oh, yes. Yeah, all over the place. It was a generous. That's right. There's a debate at 8 p.m. there. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, I think there was a kind of we didn't communicate with each other as well as we should have. I think we made the something that was so we were really
That's great. And actually, your colleague there stood up at the end. It's just like but it gave me credibility in what I said. Brilliant. Well, good to see you. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, stay in touch. And anyone's here to help.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks a lot.
Hello.
More mobility.
Yes.
Well, I kind of, exactly how helps.
Well, that's the thing, I don't want to.
But you will also come out of it knowing you don't want us to come out and go, I just want to use this. But actually, so
You heard? Hi. Yeah. Yes, yeah. No, but that's having help.
Now, what I mean, more seriously, I'm very
Yes. Great. Yeah. Really good. That's what it's slightly sick thinking about that. Try and cry with you. I mean, I don't think I don't think
one thing I